mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about episode 10, the series finale of HBO Max's Station 11, entitled Unbroken Circle. I'm gonna do things actually a little bit different today. You know, usually I go through my notes before I start recording, and I lay them out in like a, kind of like a concise way that I can kind of go bullet point by bullet point through the things that I want to talk about. And I kind of felt like this episode doesn't really need all that, because there's not too much to really like dive deeply into here. There's just kind of like resolution to discuss. And I kind of feel like I could just talk off the top of my head on this one. I just finished watching the episode, and I thought it was a wonderful episode of television. There's a whole lot of emotion that happens in this episode that was set up consistently throughout the season, where we see these characters handling their different situations and how the pandemic impacted them. And to have that kind of come full circle, Unbroken Circle, the name of the episode, have that come full circle, and we can kind of see these characters have their resolutions, whether that's a reuniting, whether that's a coming to an understanding, or whether that's a realization that your actions had a great impact, or not even the realization for the character, but the realization for us that a character's actions had a great impact. Whatever the case may be, these resolutions to these characters' storylines were, I thought they were all beautiful, and some of them actually really resonate with me because there's aspects of this show that just don't. I don't want to say they don't resonate, but I feel like they don't impact me as deeply as they might others. So, like, to give you an example, one of the big resolutions from this episode was Tyler and his mother and Clark coming to, I think, something of an understanding during their performance of Hamlet. I'm watching this, and I told you guys this in a previous video. I don't know shit about Shakespeare. Like, I just reading it, it's so weird for me because whether I'm reading it or in this case hearing it in the play, I hear words that I understand. Like, I know all of these words, but when put together in this order, I never know what they're talking about. I'm like, I don't understand this. But, I'm watching it, and I'm trying to make connections between the words and what I know these characters are essentially saying to one another via the play text. So I'm trying to decipher the words, but eventually I stopped trying this. And I'm reading an interview with Patrick Somerville, who I think is the creator of the show. And he even says in the interview, like, you don't really need to understand the words. You just need to understand the emotions being conveyed between these people. And that's how I felt in the moment. I stopped trying to understand the words in a literal way. And I just kind of rolled with the emotion that these characters were giving me in conversing with one another, both in the scene between Elizabeth and Tyler, where he was, locked up, and Kirsten was standing outside the room with the torch, that scene, and then the actual play. And it's wonderful because even though I don't understand the literal words of the play, and I can't literally tie those words to the experiences that these characters had, it still was emotional. It still had an emotional impact on me because I could still feel what these characters were saying to one another and how they were taking and interpreting those words. So I felt validated almost in reading him say that. But the one thing that I would consider to be kind of a knock against this show is this kind of like almost like face turn for Tyler. Like, I just don't feel it was really earned. Like this is a guy who I think we're supposed to be ending this show as not necessarily fans of Tyler, but like accepting of Tyler, I think would be the best way to put it. And that's too hard of a thought to reconcile from suicide bomber kids to now he's like with his mother, and Alex is there. Speaking of Alex, this is a side tangent here. You guys let me know one of my most boneheaded displays in recording these videos history, that I inexplicably missed that this was Tyler that showed up at the hospital in the last episode, well, not the hospital, but the place where Jeevan was working on the all the pregnant women who were giving birth. And that wasn't really resolved, was it? Like how was so he was there for the one lady who ended up dying giving birth. I can't remember her name, but it wasn't a name that's tied to anything that anyone that we know in the present day storyline. Who was that? Because we know his mom is Elizabeth, and that wasn't her. Who was that he was going to visit? And somebody hypothesized that maybe that baby was Alex. We don't get that confirmation. I don't know if that's the case or not. I think that's the thing that we can theorize and kind of like, yeah, that's probably or possibly or whatever. It's on the table. But we didn't get much of a resolution to that. And I thought that was the one thing that I was kind of looking for is coming into this episode. That wasn't the one thing. It was one of several things. But it was something I was looking for was what was he doing there? And who was that woman in relation to him? But shout out to y'all. I think I replied to one of the comments with this, but long story short, what happened that day, I knew my daughter was home from daycare for an entire week, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of this week, and I was in charge of her. And it made it so that I couldn't do anything during the day. She's 2 years old. I can't, be doing these videos with a 2-year-old just running around. So I knew that I wouldn't have an opportunity to watch and record videos for Station 11 on Thursday. I wanted to make sure you guys got the videos. So I woke up. Y'all better fucking thank me for this. I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning to watch those episodes as soon as they dropped and record the video and get the video posted, all that good stuff before my daughter woke up. So that was my dedication to getting the video to you guys, because I knew I wouldn't get to it. If I didn't do that, I wouldn't get to it until super, super, super late at night. But that's neither here nor there. But the reason I mentioned that is that's why I think I was too boneheaded to miss that was him. But I don't know, for me, I thought it was him. And I looked at the kid, I'm like, that doesn't look like him though. I said 3 o'clock in the morning. So accept it. Just give me a break. But this week, we don't get that resolved, but I did find it interesting to see how Tyler and Elizabeth and Clark wrapped up their storylines. And I thought that scene during the play was great. Even though I didn't understand what they were saying. It's so weird to me because I watched the captions on, I'm reading the words. I'm like, I know every single one of these words, but in this order, I don't know what you're talking about. But I have to say, though, when we look at all of the different aspects of this show, I find that aspect to be the least compelling. Like the stuff in year 20 with Tyler and the Traveling Symphony, to a degree, I find to be the least compelling. The stuff I found the most compelling was the storylines that were happening as the pandemic was kind of really hitting, and then everything with Kirsten and Jeevan. So let me move on to Miranda, who I thought we were done with the last time we saw Miranda, but no, it turns out that Miranda's actually responsible for kind of like everything that worked out at the end of this series, because Miranda actually speaks to the pilot of the plane that never let anyone off, the one that arrived at the airport after Clark and his people got there, and they never got off that plane. And we find out that was Miranda's doing, that she talked this pilot into keeping them on the plane. And, it's interesting to see how small actions can have big consequences or repercussions or results, whatever, because consequences make it sound like it's something bad. But like if it wasn't for Miranda being so passionate about giving the people who are already in the airport a chance to survive, if she wasn't so passionate about that, none of what happened here happens. Presumably those people get off the plane, just one of them needs to be infected and the whole airport goes to shit. And now none of these people who reunited in this episode or maybe reunited in the last episode, but shared some emotions or had some conversations in this one, none of that happens without Miranda's action. So I still wonder, though, who was the person who somehow got off the plane okay way after the fact that the person who, I think it was Clark, ended up shooting. Who was that person? How did they survive all that time? But that's also one of those things that's not that important. I think what's more important is our takeaway of how that shooting, how that impacted Tyler as a kid and his hope, and then also how the subsequent quarantining of him and his mother impacted his the way he looked at Clark. So and then that's how we end up with the payoff that we got in this finale. So like all that, the way all of that kind of came again full circle in this episode, I thought was really wonderfully done, and I really enjoyed seeing all that come to fruition. Because like when they started showing Miranda, I'm like, why is she here? I thought we were done with Miranda, but Miranda ends up dying peacefully with her coworker there who was reading the book. So after saving all of these people, so she would never find out the repercussions, I guess, of her actions, and how that helped these people 20 years later to have these moments and get this closure. And I think that's a really dope way to end her story as well. And then lastly, I have to say, I'm not a emotional person. Like, I am not a crier. Like, I can watch something and go, that was a crazy, great emotional scene. I will not personally cry at it, but I could say, wow, that was incredible. But I have to admit, the moment that Kirsten and Jeevan saw each other, my eyes instantly were like, like they just instantly welled up. Because like that's always been my favorite aspect of this show, was the Kirsten, Jeevan, Frank stuff. And I had already reconciled myself after last week's episode that we'd probably seen the end of Jeevan. And I love how I think this actually has greater impact on me and those of us who watch this week to week. That I don't know about you guys, but I was completely blindsided by Jeevan being the doctor. And I look back and I'm like, I should have known this, but not really, because like we end the last episode with him, seemingly going out on maybe like a doctor mission, but I'm not thinking like this is going to have anything to do with the traveling symphony. And then they don't really say anything about a doctor coming until this episode. So there's no way I could have really made that connection. But I think the week-long gap is what did it, because whoever it was says, it was Elizabeth, says, the doctor takes a day to get here and a day to leave. So, after the play, you and your people can leave. And I feel like if you binge this and you're hearing that line, say 10 minutes after you just finished episode 9, you might go, oh shit, is Jeevan the doctor? But with the week gap in between, I had completely forgotten about it. So when she says that line, I just go, I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, okay, so the doctor's coming. It's going to take him or her a day, and then, whatever. I'm going to see what happens. When I saw the fucking, limp with the cane, and I was blown away. I'm like, holy fuck, it's Jeevan, and he's at the airport. I filled up with emotion because I loved their relationship and everything that they built over the course of this season. I loved everything with Kirsten and Jeevan, and the idea of seeing them potentially get to reunite after 20 years immediately filled me with excitement, joy. But then they said that he left, and I'm like, oh my God. And I'm sitting here preparing, when I get in front of a camera and talk about this episode, how am I going to justify to my audience a near miss of Kirsten and Jeevan reuniting? Is this episode going to help me feel comfortable with setting up that circumstance but not paying it off? And I'm like, this is going to be a tough hill to climb. And if they do this, and it's really hard for them to convince me that it's okay. And if they don't, I'm going to really have no choice but to kind of get on here and shit on that aspect of the episode, unless I can get a viable reason how the storyline is better or more true if they actually don't reunite. So I'm thinking about that while I'm watching the rest of the episode. And they even have a moment where they say the doctor said it before he left. It was when Kirsten overheard that Sarah had passed over the walkie-talkie. Side note on Sarah, like I said last week, that whole scene of her saying something, I can't remember the word she used exactly, but it was something that implied that she was about to die. And I was like, I don't know if Sarah died in this episode or not. Am I supposed to take that as she died after this conversation? Is she still going to be alive? And I still stand by. I feel like everything with Sarah toward the end was really fumbled. You got a lot of great emotional payoff in several other ways in this show and in this finale that were incredible. But I felt like the way they ended Sarah's storyline was really fumbled. It could have had more of an impact than it did. Even they show Kirsten later, and she's telling this little dirty kid, this little dirty undersea kid that came up to her, she's like, my friend died, and I just told all my other friends. I'm like, so they didn't even show us her telling the rest of the group about Sarah. So I thought that was, I really feel like they fumbled the Sarah shit. But aside from that, when they said something like, oh, the doctor said that she passed before he left, I'm like, oh, fuck, so Jeevan left? And so then now I'm spending the rest of my time kind of just thinking like, okay, I hope this is going to make me feel better about them not reuniting, because I need to figure out what the fuck I'm going to say on these videos, because I don't know how to justify this. So when she walked past him, I lost it. I fucking lost it. Like, my eyes immediately welled up. I was so happy. Like, oh, like, oh my God, I'm so glad this is happening right now. And it was a beautiful scene. That's probably one of the most beautiful scenes I've seen on television this year. There's been some great moments that I've loved on the many number of shows. Well, it's hard for me to say this year technically, but I mean for 2021 shows. We'll put it that way. There's been a lot of great moments. I think the best moment of this year was the Succession season finale. But as far as like beautiful moments that just make you feel like, oh wow, that was incredible, that's number one. Like that, and they did such a great job, I feel like, with kind of like, I don't want to call it fake outs because that makes it sound cheap and tawdry, like it's just something that they did just to razzle and dazzle you. But the feelings of emotions that the roller coaster of emotions that they take you on as it pertains to Kirsten and Jeevan reuniting in the finale, I think it just made it pay off even more. It's like I said, especially for me, the realization of Jeevan being the doctor that was there for Sarah and for Clark, and then the disappointment in finding out that he left, and then the jubilance that's the best way I can describe it. The jubilance in seeing him still there. That, like, I felt like I knew these people and I wanted the best for these people. And I don't know. I just thought that was incredible stuff. So the last thing I want to talk about before I wrap up is, throughout this season, there's been a character in the Traveling Symphony who I did not visually recognize. But I did read in various reviews that I read on the show about who this was, and I just never remembered to mention it in the videos. But there was a scene in this episode that made me have to mention it, and the character is the black woman with the dreads, and it's Deborah Cox, who, if you're a little bit younger, you might not know her, but she was a very popular R&B singer, and I want to say like maybe the late 90s, early 2000s ish, somewhere in that range. And her singing Midnight Train to Georgia for Sarah, I thought this another incredible scene. I thought that was great stuff. So I wanted to shout out Deborah Cox because I feel like she's almost like an obscure reference at this point, but I thought she did a great job. And I when she started singing, I went, oh, they're about to give her a chance to really show what she can do. And I'm like, it was nice to kind of see that again, see Deborah Cox doing her thing. So that was great. Oh, and I'm sorry, I said that was the last thing. One more thing. I thought the scene at the very end, the last scene where Jeevan and Kirsten are talking, they're kind of catching up, and there's a literal fork in the road, and you could see the wagon for the traveling symphony going down the left side, and you could tell there's a fork in the road. Jeevan's boat or whatever is on the right side. You know this. So I like the fact that Kirsten got that, I don't want to say closure, but like, we know that Jeevan was worried about her because she's a kid, or was a kid. And we also know that Kirsten was worried about Jeevan because at the end of the day, there was an interesting kind of like swap in, not swap, but an opposite kind of in personalities here. Jeevan was kind of like a kid in an adult body, and Kirsten was kind of like an adult in a kid body. And Jeevan's concern for her was, I'm an adult, that's a kid, I know that it's not safe for kids. It's a very logical way of thinking, right? And he says in the scene, I was scared all the time. And conversely, she's preceded that by saying she was never scared when she was with him. And her concern over him, I'm assuming over the 20 years, was coming from the fact, like, she was always kind of a G on the inside. Like, she was always taking care of herself. She got good at throwing the knives and hunting and shit like that. She was like an adult in a kid body, very self-sufficient. And Jeevan coming along, I think, helped her more so emotionally than it did logistically. But, she says that she was never scared when she was with him. And I think that her concern for him over the course of that 20 years was more out of a like, I know I'm okay because I'm strong on the inside, but I also know that Jeevan, even though he was an adult, he was struggling mightily on the inside. You remember back to episode 1, him and the panic attacks and shit. And for her to get that closure, I think was important for her too, to see that he was okay, because she probably almost kind of looked at him as like the kid in an adult body who took care of me. Like, I hope that he was okay with losing me, and I hope that he, lived through whatever he experienced or whatever. And then she says, I'm gonna put the airport on the wheel and have your family come next year. And I liked setting up a positive future for these characters right as you end the show. And, and we can leave the show knowing that Kirsten is okay, Jeevan is okay, even if you give a fuck about Tyler, he's okay, and everybody's okay. And we know that Jeevan and Kirsten are probably going to see each other every year at that airport. And I think that's super cool. And I love that they ended the show that way, with us being able to walk from it knowing that this is a pandemic world, a post-pandemic world, but everybody managed to be okay. And I think when you look at this show as it was referred to as like a pandemic show that's not depressing or with joy or whatever like that, I don't particularly agree with that. But how it ends, I do think supports that idea that this is a show that ends on a positive note, and we can come away from it feeling like these characters are going to continue living their lives and that they're going to be okay somehow. And I think that's kind of cool. So that's how I'm going to wrap up my coverage of this show. Let me know what you thought of the finale. Did you fucking bawl your eye? I'm not going to say I bawled my eyes out, but like I said, my eyes immediately welled up when they saw each other. But how did you feel about that incredible scene? How did you feel? Did you feel like they nailed the finale? I do. I think this is a great show. I'm going to do a top 10 video at some point. This is going to be in there. So maybe I'll see you guys who have been watching these videos along with me. Maybe I'll see you guys when I do my top 10, which will probably be, I would guess, sometime next week. So I'll see you guys then. Peace.